Child, I remember back in 2000, on my way to work at my first big corporate job after I finished grad school, and I was bumping Big Pimpin' every single morning to get myself armored up to go into this space that was really sucking my soul, but it was giving me what I needed financially to take care of myself and my child. Then fast forward 26 years when Jay-Z stood on that stage at Yankee Stadium in front of 45,000 people a month ago in July 2026, and he chose to respond to critics who called him a sellout for partnering with Target, a retailer that Black activists had been boycotting since February 2025 over its DEI rollback. And here's what he said. They say I sold out. Yeah, I did sell out 3 nights. I sold out Yankee Stadium. I sold Yankee Stadium the hell out. And then he said, I don't listen to Twitter activists. They type and I laugh at them. Really? Really? Okay. And then his protege and little homie Memphis Bleak said, I don't give a fuck about that activism shit. Like, dude, really? Now listen, honey, I'm not here to tell you whether to buy that vinyl or not. That's between you, your conscience, and your honorable ancestors, and quite frankly, your dollars. But and I'm also not here to cancel Jay-Z either. I still bump his shit. But I want to do something more useful than that. I want to look at that moment through Dr. Kambon's cultural misorientation framework and what I call the Skinfolk ain't all kinfolk anti-black framework that we talked about a few videos ago. Because what happened on that stage at Yankee Stadium and prior to is a pattern and a psychological profile that started long before the Target deal, and it shows up across different people, places, things, industries, and sectors. So, this video is part of an ongoing series where we're going to be looking and examining Black culture shapers from entertainment to politics to religion and beyond so that we can develop our capacity for psychological liberation, because we need to be able to understand and recognize anti-blackness as a mental virus intentionally instilled in us and reinforced by those who look like us by a system that benefits off all of us. So stay with me. Last month, we applied Dr. Kobi Kambon's psychological virus framework of cultural misorientation. Again, we're calling it the infection. We're just going to simplify that. And we applied it to three Black women, K. Coles James, Condoleezza Rice, and Candace Owens. Now, the comments and the engagement on that video took me out. Y'all are ready to go deep, and I'm here for it, honey. So, in this video, we're going to go further. Two Black men and a Black woman we all know, Shawn Carter, aka Jay Z, Colin Kaepernick, the former NFL quarterback, and Amanda Seales, actress, comedian, all the things. And then by the end of this video, I'm going to show you why the person with the lowest infection score in this whole series so far is also the one canceled by a lot of Black folks. Now, before we get into it, if you're new here, I am Barbara Ohuninifa, griot, author, ancestral strategist, and the founder of Beautiful Powerful Love, which is a storytelling movement for the remembering, healing, and liberation of Black women and femmes at a crossroad. But this topic, this series, this analytical framework is for all of us kinfolk in the Black community, regardless of your gender identification. So, like, subscribe, ring the bell, and get you something to sip on because we're about to get into it. So, if you haven't seen the first cultural misorientation field study video, the anti Blackness virus nobody talks about, the link is in the description and I'll link it up above somewhere. Go ahead and check that out. But let me give you a quick recap of what cultural misorientation is and where it came from. Dr. Kobi Kambon was a professor and chair of the psychology department at Florida A&M University, and he spent decades building an African-centered psychology, one rooted not in how white institutions and people study Black folks, but in the actual psychology of African-descended people as something ancestrally distinct. In other words, he was a Black person studying the minds of Black people through a Black lens. I covered more about his life and contributions in my live ancestral activation series during Black History Month 2025, and I'll link that video in the description or up above too. But his central finding is that Black people carry an inborn orientation towards community and collective survival and Black cultural values that he called the African self extension orientation. Now, that conscious, active expression of that orientation The lived commitment to Black people's dignity and liberation is what he called African self consciousness. So the two work together. We just gonna call those the remembering because it's important for us to understand these concepts in our bodies in these times and not get caught up in the technical or the clinical language that was developed around it. So again, this idea of the cultural um, the way we look at our culture, the way we have this ingrained, inborn way of looking at our survival as collective, at towards community, and actually living from that. We're just gonna call that the remembering. And I've said this before, and it's worth repeating. Don't confuse awareness of African identity roots with pedestalizing continental African culture over Black American culture. It's not a if and. They work together. Continental Africans were colonized, and whether you are a FBA or whether you believe Black Americans were enslaved or not, we have all been oppressed by the same groups, and as a not a one is better than the others. Y'all really need to understand, even in that scenario, we're getting pitted against each other so that we forget who's really the ones pulling the strings and causing us all pain. But I digress. Let's get back to cultural misorientation. The infection is what happens when the entire ongoing arc of European enslavement and colonialism, Europeans enslaving others and colonizing others, systematically destroys our cultural memory. The languages were forbidden, the religious practices were banned, families were separated, children were ripped and torn from their mothers, names erased. Over 50 million Africans were put on cargo ships, and approximately 13 million survived coming to North America. You understand that? 50 million were put on the ships, only 13 million actually made it to North America. That difference equates to nearly the entire population of California, or more than the entire population of the state of Texas, or nearly the entire country of Canada. Gone. Killed en route through murder or illness, many who killed themselves rather than be slaves or whatever they were going towards because they didn't even know. Now, more than 30 million people at the bottom of the ocean, 30 million of our people at the bottom of the ocean. And that's just the ships that were headed to North America. Whew, take a breath. And then once in America, enslaved Africans lived under constant terror, beaten, raped, both men and women, bred like animals, forbidden from every cultural expression that connected us to our heritage, to our humanity. And we were forced to be dependent on the very people, at least to some extent, dependent on the very people who were brutalizing us. We had to be dependent on them for food, shelter, and survival. Yes, we tended the land and we grew our own food and we took care of each other, but we were essentially behind enemy lines and completely we were enslaved. Now, the cultural misorientation, which Dr. Cambone identified as a psychological virus, and we just gonna call the whole process of it the infection, is what happens when slavery, colonization, capitalism, patriarchy, sexism, racism, misogynoir, and the ongoing fallacy of white supremacy wear down our orientation until a Black person starts measuring themselves, their community, and their own worth by the standards of their oppressors instead of their original cultural standards. The plague, as I am calling these oppressor standards in non clinical terms, is the orientation towards materialism, extreme individualism, an alien sense of self, anti self attitudes, self destructiveness, and uncritical integration into European norms that we all live under today. Uncritical meaning we don't even examine it, we just accept it as it is what it is, and we don't even think about there's actually other ways of living, other ways of existing on this planet. And in its most severe form, a person actively works against Black collective interests, while the plague, these European standards, impacts their belief system and tells them, oh, everything's fine. You're doing everything you're supposed to do. Now, Dr. Cambone built a 6-part assessment tool to locate exactly where that infection shows up. And he called them subscales by these academic names. And we're going to give them names that actually, again, can land in the body. Now, overall, the remembering, the cellular memory of our innate cultural orientation towards community, towards interconnectedness, towards spiritual unity, towards harmony with nature, towards collective survival, when it's actively expressed, developed, and expanded, that is what is left of our original cultural orientation. And that's what we're measuring against. How much of that have we preserved? How much of that do we demonstrate? How much of that is present in our actions and behaviors? How much of our original pre colonization, pre enslavement memory is still there before the plague infected us? Cambon's research found that, again, this African self extension orientation and African self consciousness, again, the remembering, consistently resulted in higher well being, higher self esteem, better anger control, lower perceived stress, lower depression amongst Black folks. In other words, since your mind is free, your whole body responds. It's almost like the post traumatic slave syndrome can finally heal because we're not actually free. So I made a free guide to help us detect that infection by this plague within ourselves and our communities. And it's called the Kinfolk Liberation Self Reflection Guide. And it assists you in contemplating each of the subscales that we just talked about through your own inner mirror or through a community member so that you can assign scores based on your own self assessment. And the truth is, we ain't free until we are aware of the subtleties of our bondage. And because most of us don't understand that although we're not physically enslaved, most of us aren't, because uh, if you understand certain aspects of the Constitution, enslavement is still legal if you're convicted of a crime. That's a whole other video. But our ancestors were physically enslaved, and we for the most part are no longer physically enslaved, but there's still a part of us that on some degree, on some level, still is. So go ahead and grab that before you forget. The link is in the description and in the comments. Now, a quick word about what this video is and what it isn't. Everything that I'm about to share is drawn from publicly documented statements and positions and biographical record. I am the ancestral strategist applying our collective community ancestor, Dr. Kambon's framework to what I'm seeing in real time. This is not a clinical diagnosis of these people. To my knowledge, none of them have taken the official cultural misorientation scale assessment, and I'm not claiming to know their intentions or their psychological diagnosis or their character. As an ancestral strategist, I am interpreting patterns offered here so we could recognize those same patterns in ourselves and in our communities, and we can all move towards liberation accordingly. And accordingly may mean calling some people in, it may mean calling some people out. It's definitely going to mean evaluating and understanding yourself and healing whatever within you needs to be healed. But it also may mean knowing when some people are not for us, although they look like us, and we got to do what we got to do in separating our plans and vision forward from them. But again, I'm digressing. All right, let's get to the three field studies. Let's go. All right, field study number one, Shawn Corey Carter, aka Jay-Z, born December 4th, 1969, and he's 56 years old. He was born in Brooklyn, New York, and raised in the Marcy houses, also referred to as the Marcy Projects in Bed-Stuy. And he came of age during the height of New York City's crack epidemic, when Bed-Stuy experienced some of the city's highest crime rates, homicide, concentrated poverty, and high unemployment, following the heroin epidemic in the 1970s and the crack epidemic during the 1980s, or more accurately, when Black communities were flooded with drugs as a systemic response to the civil rights and Black power movements of the 60s and 70s. So you see how that works? We have civil rights in the 60s, and then our communities flooded with heroin in the 70s. Black power movements in the 70s, we're starting to reclaim who we are. Communities flooded with crack in the 80s. It's not an accident, and that's how it works. Now, his father left the family when Sean was around 11 years old, and he's even described being shot by his father's associates when he was a teen, as well as shooting his own brother over stolen jewelry when he was 16. Yes, he sold crack cocaine as a teenager and a young adult. And this was all, he talked about it in his music, he talks about it in his book. This is not new news. And he does tend to frame it as survival rather than glorification. But you got to think about what those decisions and what those experiences fully meant to his psyche. He attended George Westinghouse High School and so did other hip hop icons like the notorious B.I.G. Biggie Smalls, and excuse me, Christopher Wallace and Trevor Smith, aka Busta Rhymes. They all came from one of this area, and they emerged from one of the principal incubators of East Coast hip hop and one of the most influential black cultural ecosystems in modern American history. One could argue that his origin is one of the many versions of a blackety black ass American life. Now, to clarify, Jay Z attended multiple Brooklyn high schools, with George Westinghouse being one of them, but he left school around 16 or 17 without graduating as he leaned into that drug dealer life. Now, years later, he would describe the streets as the education that shaped both his survival and his business philosophy, though he began to read more as an adult. After being rejected by major record labels, he co founded Rockefeller Records in 1995, and he released Reasonable Doubt in 1996. And let me just clarify in case some of y'all don't know, he co founded Rockefeller Records using the money that he made selling drugs and not necessarily stopping selling drugs while he was making this album, but I digress. And he built Rock Nation into a global entertainment company and was recognized by Forbes as hip hop's first billionaire in in 2019. I'm getting my 19 mixed up. I'm just so flabbergasted. It's brilliant what he has done, but at what cost? All of the people who were impacted by the crack epidemic all in some way contributed to his success. But it doesn't take away the fact that he's a musical and a lyrical genius. He has the most Grammy wins in history. He was inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Grammy Hall of Fame, and he received Dr. Dre's Global Impact Award at the 66th Grammy Awards in 2024. So let me tell you a little bit about his business move. So NFL Rock Nation partnership in 2019, where Jay-Z partnered with the NFL to manage the league's entertainment and social justice initiatives. Social justice initiatives. The same NFL that effectively blackballed Colin Kaepernick for kneeling against police brutality. Now, the partnership was widely criticized as providing the NFL with racial cover. Jay Z's response to Kaepernick's protests: I think we've moved past kneeling. The statement has been perceived, and may not be off, as a direct betrayal, meaning like being perceived as a direct betrayal may not be off. A black billionaire telling black activists that his protest was over in exchange for a corporate partnership. Next, well, I don't know what order it was in, but he also, in terms of his business moves, he was the public face of Barclays Center development in Brooklyn, a project linked to the displacement of Black and Brown communities in Prospect Heights and surrounding neighborhoods. He invested $1 million, a fraction of the project's cost, and received enormous branding value in return. He later sold his stake. But okay, he's done some good for the community too. Like he's made some contributions around criminal justice reform, like being a founding partner of the Reform Alliance, as well as a documentary production on social justice topics and the so-called war on drugs. So he's done some things. Now, the Shawn Carter Foundation, which he formed in 2003 and is still in operation, 2003, just before the Barclays Center deal. And I'm mentioning that because you need to understand and see the strategic moves that he's making. Now, he co founded this with his mother, Gloria Carter, and the foundation provides college scholarships and mentorships to students who face social economic hardship. Great optics. In 2021, the foundation partnered with Tiffany and Company and Bay Good, his wife's foundation, to pledge $2 million specifically for HBCU scholarship funding focused on students in arts and the creative field. The 20th anniversary gala for his foundation in July 2023 raised $20 million in a single night, including a single $10 million legacy donation from Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez, the new wifey, I guess. Now, what a legacy donation means that it's a planned charitable gift arranged during a person's lifetime, but they don't get the money until after his death through an estate plan, will, or trust. So basically, he just got a promise of $10 million after dude dies. All that sounds good at the surface level, but charitable donations are an interesting tax saving tool of the wealthy. And $10 million for a billionaire like Bezos is the equivalent to us decluttering our house with a drop off to Goodwill. Plus, you better believe all that helped open doors for proximity to perceived value. By his own account, Jay Z's philosophy has always been clear. On Reasonable Doubt in 1996, the album at the center of the Target controversy, he rapped, "I'd rather die enormous than live dormant." And on Can't Knock the Hustle, the first track on that same album, Jay Z basically defends the ethics of hustling as a response to structural exclusion, arguing that outsiders can't judge the survival strategies available to marginalized folks in the hood. And then 30 years later, he's still saying the same thing, but the bag has gotten exponentially bigger. That philosophy has always had consequences, much like selling crack to your own people. Those visible consequences are just not for him. But again, what does that do to your psyche? Now, don't get me wrong, dude is brilliant, lyrically talented, and an engaging storyteller. But let's learn the assessment and see what else might be there. First, let's look at the bag, his materialism orientation. Honey, it's severe. We already see that. This is Jay Z's dominant subscale, and it has been from the beginning. But I want to distinguish between the two phases of the bag because they're not the same. Phase one of his bag, he's a black boy in Marcy Projects with no legitimate economic access, and he turns to the one market that will employ him and allow him to pursue entrepreneurship, selling crack. That's not the infection. That's the system doing exactly what it was designed to do, create conditions where the oppressor's plague, economic logic of accumulation and survival of the fittest, is the only game available. But phase two of the bag, a billionaire with every option available to him in the world, uses his black cultural credibility to provide cover for a corporation, multiple corporations, that abandon DEI commitments to black communities. That's for Target. For NFL, it basically blackballed Kaepernick. For the Barclays, they were displacing the black and brown folks. He provided his black face in exchange. Now, in terms of the Target situation, he crossed the picket line during an active, well, the boycott line during an active boycott organized by Black civil rights activists in exchange for an exclusive vinyl deal. That's the bag as the infection, and it stopped being about survival for him a long time ago. The decision to hustle across a community picket line when you have more than enough money that you didn't have to do that, then to ridicule the boycott, ooh, child. The Target boycott formally started nationwide in February 1st, 2025. The Minnesota organizers, civil rights attorney Nakima Levy Armstrong, Monique Cullors Doty of, and I might be mispronouncing her name, of Black Lives Matter Minnesota, and Jelani Hussein of Council of American Islamic Relations Minnesota, they came together and launched it after Target immediately eliminated DEI commitments in the first days of the second Trump administration. And I felt it important to name them because they are the ones on the ground where Target is headquartered and all the other things that are happening and have been happening in Minnesota. They were the ones who stood up and started the process. I'm gonna just say other religious leaders jumped on the bandwagon, and they might be on the list for us to assess using this framework in a upcoming video. I'm just saying. Now, this boycott contributed to a $12 billion drop in Target's market valuation, a CEO change, and the elimination of over 1,000 corporate jobs, which were not held primarily by Black and Brown folks anyway. That's Black economic power working. And into the middle of that, in June 2026, Jay Z released a limited white 2 LP album, vinyl, for Reasonable Doubt for the 30-year anniversary. Exclusive packaging, exclusive cover art, collectible insert, all through Target exclusively. The Black Standard album, mind you, the one that's a limited collector's item, is only at Target. The Black Standard item is available, or was available, or I guess is, through Rock Nation directly. He gave Target the collector's edition during an active boycott. And of course, Black people called it out. Well, some Black folks call it out. Some people think it's brilliant, but we see where they are infected as well. But he got on that stage at Yankee Stadium in front of 45,000 people and freestyled talking about he don't listen to Twitter activists. He laughed at them. There's really no comparison. I don't listen to Twitter activists. They type and I laugh at them. Really, Ninja? Those activists you laugh at organized a boycott that took $12 billion off a corporation's market cap. And you laugh at them from your sold out stadium. Okay. The plague does not need you to actually actively hate Black people. It just needs the bag to be large enough that you stop giving a fuck about your people, if you ever really did. The next subscale we're going to look at for Homeboy is the individualism orientation, which we call in the solo dolo. And it's high. Clearly, Jay Z's entire career philosophy is organized around individual ascent as the primary value. I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman. Now, beautiful play on words, but you're telling you who he is. The individual self as the enterprise, the bag as the proof. This is the plagues, the European worldview's core ontological premise that self is individual, autonomous, and competing rather than communal. This aspect of the infection has metastasized inside a man who's made his name off of Black collective culture. Because recall, he was incubated in an environment that produced many hip hop legends. He was not alone or an anomaly. The contrast that makes this visible in 2019, when he partnered with the NFL, the same league that effectively blackballed Colin Kaepernick for kneeling, Jay Z said, I think we've moved past kneeling. He didn't say it as in the movement. Jay Z's involvement legitimized the league while the player whose protest sparked the movement remained unsigned. He said it as a man who just got a check. The community had not moved past anything. He moved past it solo dolo. The next subscale, the mask. For Jay Z, it's moderate. This is the alien self orientation. Jay Z has never really fully been alienated from his blackness, not in the way that Candace Owens from our last analysis is. He doesn't perform for white audiences by disparaging black people directly, unless you're an activist. His self concept is rooted in blackety black ass Brooklyn, both a product of and a contributor to the tapestry of black culture. And I want to name that because, yes, he has contributed to black culture, but he is not black culture. He is not synonymous with black culture. And I don't know if he realizes that. But for Jay Z, the mask is much subtler. It's the adoption of the European value system of accumulation as the ongoing principle of his identity, without recognizing that as the European plague. He thinks he's talented Sean from Marcy Projects that then come up and just keeps coming up. But he's also a billionaire who laughs at community organizers and activists who work boots on the ground to help people in all the Marcy projects across the nation while he receives multi-million dollar philanthropy deals. I'm sorry, donations with his foundation. Both are true. The mask is the betrayal of one aspect of his identity over the other. The blade is the next subscale, and it's about that anti self. And for Jay Z, it's moderate, but it's escalating. The blade is again that anti-self when the infection turns into active hostility towards black people. Now Jay-Z ain't Candace Owens. He don't go on Fox News talking shit, But the Target deal, the NFL partnership, the freestyle dissing black activists, these function as the blade, whether he intends them that way or not. He used his platform and his cultural credibility, which is significant, to make it easier for people to dismiss the boycott and for black folks to abandon it. This is the blade operating through brand alignment rather than explicit hostility. Then here come his boy, Memphis Bleak, talking about, I don't give a fuck about that activism shit. That's some anti-black shit that ignores the fact that without artist activists, understand that word, artist activists, because they were of the past, his black ass would not only have access to the Chitlin circuit, not Yankee Stadium. Come on, man, do better. You testing my compassion, I swear. Okay. Next, next upscale is the toll, that self-destructive orientation. And for Jay-Z, it's low personally, but it's high communally. And it's about that normalizing harm to yourself or to your community. Now, Jay-Z has not personally self-destructed. He's thriving by every conventional metric. But the toll at the community level, the cost his choices impose on Black collective organizing is measurable. He traded on the strength of being a Black cultural icon with Barclays, the NFL, Target, even in philanthropy, giving them all Black cultural legitimacy, effectively undermining effective strategy towards systemic change that would benefit Black people as a whole, as a community. That's like selling crack to your people, but not even so you can feed yourself or for your children, but for power. The toll isn't always personal. Sometimes what gets extracted from the community is the toll. The next subscale, the seat, the integration orientation. Ooh, Jay-Z is severe. This is Jay-Z's second dominant subscale along with the bag. This is the one that connects everything. The seat measures the degree to which a person believes Black advancement is synonymous with integration into existing white institutional structures, as opposed to building independent Black power. Now, yes, Jay-Z has built. Jay-Z's entire mogul arc is the seat, though. Not the poverty drug dealing phase that may have been more about survival, but his survival, not Black people as a whole. Because if you're selling drugs to your people, it's like, damn, other people, I'm about to get mine. But think about his mogul arc, the Jeff Jam presidency, the NFL partnership, the Barclays deal, which he was again the public face of a development project, the title acquisition, the Live Nation partnership, even the more recent Target deal. Even the connections afforded him through tax beneficial donations he accepts into his foundation from people like Jeff Bezos. It's like that little boy from the Marcy Project is still showing them that he has always been worthy of the opportunities and deals they wouldn't give him before he made his own. So Jay Z's overall infection level is severe, bag dominant, with severe seat dynamics escalating over time. Jay-Z is a complete portrait of the plague inside a Black lyrical genius. Individual accumulation as the organizing principle, institutional integration as the measure of success, even if it's not him personally, like a Condoleezza Rice, but scooting his table that he built right up to theirs when the bag is right, and then calling it success, is the same thing. Plus, him viewing the community's organized power as a minor inconvenience on the way to Yankee Stadium. But even with all of that, we have to see the bigger picture with compassion. Hold accountability, but with the clarity that he is not a monster. He is a man who came from nothing and built everything, while in his early days of poverty and trauma, because poverty is a form of trauma, the plague seeded itself so powerfully and rewarded him so thoroughly that he can't hear and see and understand the people that it's harming. There are true monsters in this world, and they don't sell out Yankee Stadium. They own governments, banks, and whole industries, just like they owned people, slave ships, and insurance companies, but we never hear their names. They leverage infected skin folk to keep our minds distracted and colonized. Two, we talking about Colin Rand Kaepernick, 38 years old, born November 3rd, 1987. in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to a 19-year-old white mother and a black birth father who has been described in biographical sources as having West African ancestry. Yeah, like most of us, but okay. His parents separated before he was born, and his birth mother placed him for adoption at 5 weeks old. His adoptive parents, Rick and Teresa Kaepernick, were a white couple from Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, and Rick was an operations executive at a California cheese company. Y'all know Wisconsin is a dairyland, right? They got some good cheese and ice cream. I'm just saying. But anyway, Teresa was a nurse and they had two biological children. They'd also lost two infant sons to congenital heart defects before they adopted Colin. So they was looking for a third child and he became that child. Then they moved from Wisconsin to California, where Colin was around 4 years old when they moved. And they moved to a predominantly white community. And then he would go on to attend John Pittman High School, a predominantly white school, and then University of Nevada, Reno, a predominantly white institution, where he earned his bachelor's degree while playing football. Now, growing up, Kaepernick remembers drawing his family as a child using a brown crayon for himself and yellow crayons for his siblings and parents. He was processing that racial difference in his head through a crayon box, but he didn't have any real black cultural context to help him understand what he was seeing. When he traveled with his white family, hotel managers would approach him nervously, not recognizing him as part of the family. And at Little League games, his mother, when other parents didn't know whose mama she was, overheard racist comments about that little black child striking out all their sons. And damn well they didn't say that little black child. Now, his adoptive mother, I can't call her mama saying some dumb shit like this, told him that his cornrows were not professional and that he looked like a little thug. In his Netflix series, Colin in Black and White, Kaepernick addressed this directly. I know my parents loved me, but there were still very problematic things that I went through. And I think it's important to show that this can happen in your own home. And we see that Kaepernick developed much of his Black political identity later through lived experience, study, and activism. In other words, his racial consciousness was something he had to build from within himself. Kaepernick was drafted by the San Francisco 49ers in 2011, second round, 36 overall. He became the starting quarterback in 2012. I was about to make it 2020. I want that man to come back to football. Anyway, he became the starting quarterback in 2012 and led the team to a Super Bowl win. He rushed for a playoff record of 181 yards against Green Bay. He was a legitimate starting NFL quarterback, not a marginal player, not a bench warmer. This matters because in August 2016, Kaepernick began sitting during the national anthem in preseason games. After a conversation with former Green Beret and NFL long snapper Nate Boyer, who suggested kneeling as a posture that honored the military while still being visible as a protest, Kaepernick shifted from sitting to kneeling. He said, I'm not going to stand up to show pride for a flag for a country that oppresses Black people and people of color. He didn't say that oppresses me or didn't give me the money I wanted. He said, my people. That distinction is everything. That is the African worldview's ontological foundation. I am because we are. And again, don't get confused with the word African and being political, talking about Africa being better than Black people, African people being better than Black people in the United States. We're talking about something that's deeper, richer, and older than anybody living now or anybody living in the last several hundred years. It's something that is ingrained in us and something that is in our DNA. That's what was coming through. I am because we are. And it was emerging through a man who had no communal structure through which to learn it. He taught himself. He chose it consciously, or rather, it was activated within him. The cost was immediate and total. He is widely viewed as having been effectively blackballed from the NFL, although they would never admit that. After that 2016 season, no team signed him despite his obvious demonstrated ability. He signed a grievance alleging owner collusion. The case ended in a confidential settlement in February 2019 with no admission of wrongdoing by the NFL. Of course not. And that same year, Jay-Z, Rock Nation, and the NFL deal was announced. Do the math. Kaepernick has not played a professional football game since January 1st, 2017. He was 29 years old. He has repeatedly posted workout videos and participated in NFL workouts, so he continues to train daily for a return that may never come. But in the aftermath of all of that, look at what he built. The Know Your Rights Camp, which is co founded with his partner, Nessa Diab, who is an Egyptian American activist and media professional. It's a nonprofit that serves Black and Brown communities, focusing on self empowerment, legal rights education, and community organizing. He also created Raw Vision Media, a media company focused on showcasing the work of Black and Brown professionals and creatives. And then in 2018, for the 30th anniversary of the Just Do It campaign, he partnered up with Nike and had a campaign that was about believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. Nike chose to align with a man who had been effectively expelled from his sport for a political protest. Now, Nike sales reportedly increased substantially immediately after the campaign. It was a massive commercial success and a direct rebuke to everyone who said his activism would cost him everything. Again, why a year later, the NFL and Jay Z had a partnership, in my opinion. Colin in Black and White is a Netflix series that explores his adolescence as a black child in a white family. And in that series, he compared the NFL combine process to a slave auction, a comparison that grew criticism but reflected a developing African, blackity black centered critical consciousness that was, by then, fully his own. And some of y'all, if you understand what the slave auctions, how it behaved, how it performed, what it looked like, and how NFL combine process, how it performs, how they behave, and what it looks like. Not to mention what most of the NFL team owners look like. You can understand that is a very fair assessment. Moving on, and then he created Change the Game, a graphic novel in 2023 that further explores his childhood biracial experiences and the development of his activism. And he was awarded the W.E.B. Du Bois Medal from Harvard in 2018 and the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Ripple of Hope Award in 2020. In September 2025, he funded the independent autopsy of Trey Reed, a Delta State University whose death raised questions. A direct activist intervention that required neither a platform moment or a viral opportunity. And then he did it again recently when he funded the independent autopsy of Nolan Wells, the young athlete that was missing, then found dead under suspicious circumstances after a 4th of July 2026 boat trip to Horn Island, Mississippi with friends. He and his partner confirmed that they married years ago in 20, well, they confirmed it in 2025, and they have one child that was born in 2022, and they both run the organizations together. Now, Wifey was pissed, and she called it out on social media when she condemned Rock Nation of using manipulative tactics behind the scenes against Kaepernick when they partnered with the NFL. Essentially, Jay Z's 2019 NFL deal traded on the cultural capital Kaepernick's kneeling created, while Kaepernick himself remained excluded from the league, just like his Target deal traded on the cultural capital of our collective protests, or any of the deals that I've mentioned. But I digress. We already talked about Shawn. We talking about Kaepernick now. Now, Jay Z did say we've moved past kneeling. Kaepernick had not moved anywhere. He was still kneeling. He still is in practice every day at the gym, waiting for a call that didn't come. Again, get that Skinfolk, Kinfolk Liberation Self Reflection Guide. It can help you contemplate these subscales we about to go through for Kaepernick through your own inner mirror. I digress. Let's go ahead and run Colin's assessment, and I'm going to keep it brief through most of them and save the most startling ones for last. All right, first subscale, the bag, materialism. For Kaepernick, it's pretty low. Kaepernick walked away from a career generating millions per year at 29 in his prime. He sacrificed an estimated 60 to 80 million in projected career earnings. The Nike deal and settlement have maintained his financial stability, we guess, but he was willing to sacrifice the bag when the bag required standing, or rather laying down. That's the diagnostic marker. The bag for him is a tool, not his identity. And that's the thing. Wealth, abundance, prosperity aren't inherently oppressive, but when accumulating is intrinsic to identity and definition of worthiness, that automatically creates the conditions for exploitation. Kaepernick made a conscious choice with full knowledge of the cost. Jay Z made a different conscious choice with full knowledge of the optics. I'm just saying. And the next subscale, the solo dolo individualism for Kaepernick is low. His kneeling protest was explicitly collective. I'm not going to stand up to show pride in a flag for a country that oppresses Black people and people of color. Us. Then he goes on to build entities organized around communal benefit, very different than philanthropy and foundations. The remembering, our kinfolk worldview says, I am because we are, Ubuntu. Kaepernick arrived at that orientation within himself. That's cellular memory, and that is powerful. The toll, another subscale for Kaepernick, is low, though the system attempted to impose it. This subscale is where the complexity lives for Kaepernick. The NFL's blackballing was a deliberate attempt to make his activism self destructive, to prove that speaking costs everything and changes nothing. The message to every Black athlete watching, this is what happens. The system extracted his peak athletic years. And that is a real toll, not one that he imposed on himself, though, but one that the institution imposed on him as punishment for the remembering. That distinction matters. His self destructive orientation is low. The system's toll on him is high, and these are different things, and that's not what we're measuring. The seat, another subscale for him, the integration orientation is low. Kaepernick was produced by the integration machine. White family, white schools, NFL, the whitest corporate entertainment structure in professional sports. He was the seat's ideal product, a Black man so fully immersed in cultural institutional life that the institution could feel safe around him and with him. But he refused it. He looked at everything the plague had given him, this oppressor's worldview had given him, the family, the education, the career, the wealth, the platform, and said, this system is oppressing my people, and I'm not going to stand for it. And then he built outside the system. He didn't just reject the seat, he built his own furniture to support others. And it doesn't appear to be for the purposes of scooting his table into Mass's house so he could say, look, I'm here. Another subscale, the mask, the alien self, is low to moderate, kind of contextually produced but not behaviorally documented for him. But we're just going to call it low to moderate. This is the most diagnostically significant subscale in all of the studies that I've done in this particular video. The most important application of Kambon's framework was in this analysis. So let me be clear. The mask measures what is actually present in a person's behavior and self concept, not what their environment should have produced. The structural conditions of his childhood, we already discussed. That should have produced severe mask. White parents, white community, white siblings, white schools, experiencing racism in the home that loved him with no Black framework to process it through, all of that should have produced a person with severe mask. This person should be wearing it right now, still on the field or working in sports media, doing endorsement deals, keeping his head down, taking the bag, being a good old Clarence Thomas. And yet we see no record of distancing from Blackness, no evidence of seeking white institutional acceptance at the expense of his identity, no documented disparage of Black culture or Black people. But look at what the record actually shows from childhood. His adoptive mother referred to his cornrows as looking like a little thug, but he got the cornrows. He went and got cornrows in the first place. He wanted them. A child raised entirely in white cultural spaces chose an African hairstyle. As a child, he drew family portraits using a brown crayon for himself and yellow crayons for his siblings. Now, listen, Kaepernick is hella light skinned. I mean, he's biracial. He could have colored himself with a slightly darker shade of yellow and fit right into that portrait, but he knew the difference. He chose brown. He placed himself accurately, visibly, and deliberately as the different one. Cornrows, brown crayon, a child that had no black family, no black community, no black cultural education, still at the cellular level knew who the fuck he was. Kambon's framework says that African self-extension orientation, the remembering, is innate, is biogenetically coded. It persists even under the most comprehensively European developmental conditions, meaning even when surrounded by whiteness. The cornrows, the brown crayon, they're not small details. That's why I keep talking about them. They are the remembering making itself known through a child who had no language for it yet, no framework, no community, no elder to name what he was feeling, just the knowing, just the pull within himself. And then there's the matter of his birth father's ancestry, West African lineage. Certain countries were named as they talk about it. And I'm not going into detail because none of it has been fully founded yet. But ancestral lineage that has the same root as Cecile Fadiman that carried into the Boys Cayman ceremony in Haiti. Cecile Fadiman is being said to have been from Ghana, or the area now known as Ghana that was then the Gold Coast. And the same root that Ya Ashanti Wa stood on when she told the men of the Ashanti, if you're not going to fight, we will, against the British. That ancestry was not transmitted to Kaepernick through living family, community, or culture. It was transmitted through blood. And Cabone is right. If the remembering is innate, biogenetic, and deeper than socialization, then that West African lineage was holding him through every white classroom, every racist comment at Little League, every cornrow his mama misread as thuggish. I don't even know if I can call her mama because of what she said, but whatever. She served as his mama in raising him. But it held him until he was old enough to choose. He grew his afro. He studied Black history and political thought. He partnered with Nessa Diab, a woman of color who was already an activist before he was. He built Know Your Rights Camp. He built Raw Vision Media. Look at that name, Raw. And he did all of this as well as framed the NFL Combine as a slave auction on Netflix. And he knelt. Now he's again been training every day for 9 years for a return that the system will not grant him. But he has not recanted. He has not accommodated. He has not performed repentance to reclaim that bag. The mask never fully formed. And in adulthood, whatever residue remained, he took it off, burned it off consciously, deliberately, and at a pretty big financial cost. This is the remembering, the deliberate adult restoration of our self consciousness, knowing who we are in the absence of childhood cultivation. It wasn't inherited, but it was chosen. And it wasn't given consciously, but it was reclaimed from within himself. The mass subscale for Kaepernick does not tell us a story of severe misorientation that was overcome. It tells us a story of a remembering that was so persistent that it survived total immersion in the European worldview and announced itself through a brown crayon in the hand of a child who had no one to explain to him why he reached for it. Dr. Cambone would say that the remembering cannot be killed. Kaepernick may be the most visible living proof of that claim. Ooh, child, yes. Now, the subscale, the last one we're going to talk about is the blade. And for Kaepernick is absent. He has never disparaged Black communities, Black culture, Black people. Not once. Not even when it would have been profitable to do so, given his market position as a biracial man with a white adoptive family and mainstream athletic credibility. It would have been a very lucrative lane for him to claim, but he didn't take it. He has absorbed death threats, presidential condemnation, career destruction, and public mockery without redirecting that pain towards the community he serves, without getting on a stage and disparaging people who put their lives on the line for the fights and the rights and safety of oppressed people. I'm just saying. But overall, Colin Kaepernick's cultural misorientation virus infection is minimal. The lowest cultural misorientation score in this entire three-way study, the lowest infection. A man who essentially was raised by the machine its ideal product in every structural sense, and chose to dismantle it from the inside. A man who had every condition for severe infection produced the most visible act of the remembering in modern American sports. Environment does not determine kinfolkness. The remembering is that durable. Kaepernick found his way to the remembering through conscious choice and cellular memory, ancestral memory. Take a breath. And there's something coming up I want to say because there is a difference that we have to call out. Yes, he was raised in very white environments, while Jay Z was raised in some of the blackest of blackest environments. But the difference of poverty and safety is how the seed can take root. The seed of the plague can take root. Not having to worry about his livelihood if he was going to get shot or jumped or ganged up on, not having to worry about where his meals was going to come from, how he was going to get money, how he and his family were going to survive. Absent of all of that, he could be and exist in a world without having to feel the brunt of what it meant to be a black man in this world. So while the environment did not make him um, reject his own people, reject his own blackness, it gave him the space to breathe. And I want to call that out as part of us understanding when we get to talking about the compassion, uh, that the conditions that the plague creates for us, that capitalism creates for us, keeps us susceptible to the plague. Just sit with that for a moment. But we gonna move on. Just a little side note here before we move on to our field study number three. The sports and entertainment industry shapes culture under the guise of reflecting culture through our most creative and talented beings. But I think we can all see that it is an industry. And by the way, an industry is by definition a group of similar businesses or economic activities that make or provide the same types of goods or services. So the sports and entertainment industry looks for ways to shape and influence minds for profit and control, not for fun, not to add to culture or for beauty or for actual entertainment, truly, but to create the optimal condition in order to extract your money and control your attention so they can charge other industries for your attention so they can extract your money. Do you hear me though? So, what happens when an actress in entertainment understands those dynamics and calls it out? Well, I guess they become unlikable, which brings us to field study number three. Amanda Ingrid Seals, born July 1st, 1981, and she's 45 years old. Now, she was born in Inglewood, California, and her mother, Annette Seals, was born and raised in Grenada, and she was a nurse. And for the most of Amanda's childhood, she was a single mother. Amanda and her mother are both dual citizens in U.S. and obviously Grenada. Now, her father is African American from Roxbury, Boston, but he was largely absent. Amanda has called him, in her own words, irrelevant, and has described her own mother as deeply supportive. Now, that support enabled her to earn a Bachelor of Arts degree from SUNY Purchase, as well as a Master of Arts from Columbia University in African American Studies with a concentration in hip hop culture. She is the only subject across all studies, entertainment, political, or sports, who holds a graduate degree in a field directly centered on African diasporic cultural analysis. So that means that she didn't come to African consciousness through personal experience alone. Seals studied it formally at an Ivy League institution through the academic frameworks of Black studies. Now, mind you, she pursued this education alongside a career in entertainment starting at age 12 with film and television credits, giving her early industry experiences inside white controlled production infrastructures. And she has spoken about being called racial slurs by white child actors on set. So then after college, moving forward, she became a VJ on MTV's Sucker Free Countdown, or MTV2's Sucker Free Countdown, and she was branded as Amanda Diva. The diva persona, outspoken, confident, intellectually aggressive, made her both visible and controversial. Now, she's mentioned that her reputation as difficult comes from this period and has never fully left her. And then she went on to briefly replace one half of the R&B duo Floetry, but that partnership was short-lived and contentious. And then later, she was cast as Tiffany Dubois on Issa Rae's HBO comedy drama Insecure. The role brought her to a national prominence. However, behind the scenes, her relationship with the show's infrastructure, with the cast, crew, fractured. And in January 2019, Amanda became only the third Black woman in HBO's history to be featured in her own solo stand up comedy special, I Be Knowing. That shit was funny as fuck. Amanda went on to join the syndicated daytime talk show The Real as the fifth co host. She did the boogie bounce after 6 months, declining to renew her contract. Her explanation was clear. She was asked not to discuss certain topics and was not given the freedom to authentically express herself as a Black woman, her words, and saw the absence of Black voices in leadership reality. Now, Amanda hosted the 2020 BET Awards from her home during the pandemic, and she has not been invited to subsequent BET Awards, NAACP Image Awards, or Black Girls Rock events. The very rooms built to celebrate Black excellence closed the door on an actress with a master's in Black Studies from Columbia. Which reminds me, squirrel moment. I'm working on a skinfolk kinfolk analysis with a hypothesis that respectability politics delays Black liberation. Can you guess who the subjects are? Let me know your guess in the comments, and make sure you subscribe and ring the bell so you know when that video is coming up, because it got me tripping. Anyway, back to Seals. In 2024, she made a decisive break, leaving the entertainment industry, Black Hollywood, to work independently. In her current ecosystem, which operates under Smart, Funny, and Black Productions, which she describes as a people powered, independent multimedia operation committed to decolonizing minds by any joke necessary. Okay, girl. And it has become the umbrella for everything that she builds. She did have views from Amanda Land, which was a live stream on YouTube, but she ended it as a live stream. So you can probably just look at that as just a part of her ecosystem now. It pops up every now and then in different ways, but it's not gone completely. In 2026, she returned to music under her updated identity, Amanda Diva 2.0, with her album Truth Translator after 15 years of hiatus, and it draws from hip hop, deep house, roots reggae, and other traditions, and it functions as another vehicle for her political, cultural, and intellectual work. And she's also listed among KBLA's current, in at least the summer of 2026, on air personalities for her Summer of Seals radio show. And then there's her Radical Rhythms experience, which is a newer offering that combines movement and breath work with conversation and political cultural engagement once a month at Comedy in Harlem. She live streamed the last one, and I was able to catch it. I found it to be like a tapestry of healing experiences and conversations. Because she was like having conversations with people in the audience. It was wild. And then she has her Amanda Land Exports, her independent commerce and merchandising arm, and she cracks me up. If somebody starts talking shit, she got T-shirts with what things people are saying about her. Like homegirl, like the stickers and the pins, she will come up with some merchandising products, or put her artwork on products and have that available like with the quick. So that's Amanda Lynn Exports. And then there's her Small Doses, the original podcast, which concluded with a series finale in October 2025. But the book Small Doses, Potent Truths for Everyday Use, which was published in 2019, is still in print. So Homegirl got layers, but it's not without some patterned controversy, like joining a Black cultural space and encountering interpersonal friction, like with Issa Rae and whatever went down on set, and Floetry and whatever went down with that. And that's repeated throughout her career. Like she was denied entry to a Black Hollywood Emmys after party by Issa Rae's publicist, and something that she's discussed and has recently an issue that's recently resurged with the Insecure reunion tour, which she was not invited to be a part of. Interpersonal friction. And then she was criticized for her conflict with Marcus Books, a culturally important Black owned bookstore, related to revenue agreement or lack thereof for her book event held there. Interpersonal friction. And she responded to fans who inquired about unfulfilled merchandise orders and threatened to cancel the orders based on how customers asked about them. Interpersonal friction. Several aspects of her public communication could potentially be understood through a different lens. In April 2024 on Club Shay Shay, which by the way, yeah, I've done an analysis on him too. That video is coming. Anyway, she did an appearance on Club Shay Shay, and she shared that she self-diagnosed as autistic. And she connected it directly to the difficult, mean, too much labels she's carried her whole career. So, for example, one of the most noticeable things about her communication is her insistence on precision. The communication priority can sometimes be there's an unresolved contradiction, let's resolve the contradiction. No fucks about what's politically correct. Another example is that she has repeatedly demonstrated a willingness to correct people who she believes are factually or ethically wrong. And even when she'll even do that when doing so violates the social expectation that you should let something slide. Now, what happens when a highly verbal, intellectually intense Black woman who self identifies as on the autistic spectrum operates inside a culture and an industry that already has highly racialized, gender based expectations about how Black women are supposed to communicate and operate? I'm just saying, we'll come back to that. But now let's run the assessment. All right. Amanda Seals' first subscale is the bag, materialism, and it's low. She has repeatedly walked away from money. She left the Real, that daytime syndicated talk show. The bag was offered and she declined. And she has been excluded from major industry opportunities that would generate significant income. And she has chosen to build her own platforms rather than accommodate the ones that would pay more. This is the pattern of a woman and a person who prioritizes voice over income. The bag subscale measures whether accumulation is the organizing principle of the personality, and for Amanda, it's not. So the bag is low. The solo dolo, low to moderate. This is the most internally contradicted dimension. On one hand, Seal's work is organized around collective Black consciousness. Smart, funny, and Black celebrates communal knowledge. Her political commentary centers collective liberation. Her departure from the real was explicitly framed as refusing to betray her people. On the other hand, she has a documented pattern of interpersonal conflict with Black collaborators and Black institutions, and even customer service situations with her own fans. The question Cambon's framework raises is this individualism orientation? Is this solo dolo? Or is this a person with high remembering who lacks the relational skills, possibly amplified by neurodivergence, to operate communally in this culture, even though her values are communal? The honest answer holds probably both possibilities. Her ideology is about the collective, but her practice sometimes undermines the collective relationships her ideology demands, if that makes sense. That's how I'm seeing. And this also why her solo dolo is low, possibly moderate, because we're going into an area of neurodivergence that this scale, this assessment does not touch. Moving on to the next subscale, the blade, it's low. She does not diss Black communities or culture or Black culture outside of pointed critique. Her conflicts are with Black individuals and institutions she perceives as having failed the community, not with Blackness itself. Her critique of Kamala Harris, which a lot of Black creators are just like, they still heated about that. It wasn't anti-Black, it was pro accountability. Now, you can have your viewpoint around rallying around a one issue, as they say, one issue voter, or critiquing Kamala Harris, but it ain't anti-Black. Her critique of Charlemagne was about intellectual property and authenticity, not about denigrating black media. But the Marcus Books incident publicly attacking the oldest black owned bookstore in Oakland for asking for a sales percentage at their own store might suggest a blind spot where her personal frustrations can override her stated commitment to supporting black communities. Now, that's not Blade or anti self orientation in Cambon's terms. That's not organized around hostility towards blackness. But it is a behavioral pattern that seems to contradict her values, her professed values, though I have no knowledge, no idea how the conversations and interactions actually went down outside of what's on social media and what hearsay is. That's the opposite of a Candace Owens. Going on Fox News, who we discussed in that other analysis, and that link is in the description. That's the opposite of what she was talking about, where she didn't care about white supremacists or what happened. The target is always an individual or an institution with Amanda Seals. Blackness itself, it never is the target. Now, the next subscale, the mask, is minimal. She has the lowest alien self orientation or mask of anyone I've done this analysis on, along with Megan the Stallion. That video is coming. So be sure to subscribe, and so you don't want to miss it. Let me know if you want that one to come next, because, child, these videos take a lot of energy and the analysis takes a lot of energy. So y'all let me know if you want that one next, but it's really interesting. Anyway, so Amanda holds a graduate degree in African American Studies. She created a comedy game show testing Black cultural knowledge. She left a daytime talk show because it was constraining her Black voice. She has consistently refused to perform for white institutional comfort. Now, she ain't broke, but we already talked about how she has walked away from fat checks. She calls herself a multidisciplined scholar and creative in the Black radical tradition. Her whole self concept is rooted in African diasporic identity, so the mask ain't a problem with her. Now, the seat integration orientation is also minimal. The Real was a white owned corporate daytime television show with an all woman of color hosting panel, produced by Telepictures, distributed by Warner Brothers, and broadcast nationally mainly by Fox Television. It was structurally an integration orientation vehicle. Women of color performing for a corporate infrastructure that constrains what they can say about race, as was the case for Amanda. She recognized this and left. She named the constraint explicitly. It doesn't feel good to my soul to be in a place where I cannot speak to my people the way they need to be spoken to. She was offered a new deal and she declined. She biggie bounced. And it was also a corporate infrastructure that exploited personal stories for profit, as was the case for Tamara Mowry, who left The Real after 6 seasons on that show, just a month after Amanda declined to renew her contract. Tamara later revealed in her 2022 memoir that working on that show caused her severe, debilitating anxiety and made her deeply unhappy as her private life was spotlighted by the show. Sounds like Amanda peeped game and dipped. She walked away from a national daytime talk show, a bag, a real bag, because they wanted her Black voice, but they wanted it small enough to fit their format. This is this is the inverse of Stephen A. Smith and his pattern. Smith stayed in the white-owned media infrastructure and adapted his voice to its requirements, and he got 12 million a year. Whew. Let me know in the comments if you think the degree of his, what you think the degree of his overall infection is: minimal, moderate, or severe. Obviously, I've done the analysis on him, but I have not made that video yet. So that's why I'm like, y'all let me know who you want to hear, because I got curious and I ran this analysis on a great number of people, but prepping them for video consumption is a whole other thing. So y'all let me know what you want next. But anyway, Amanda didn't just refuse the seat, and she hasn't built a table just to scoot it up just to theirs. She left the building, bought her own land, and started growing food on it. Okay, honey. Now, I don't know if she's actually done this, but I'm talking about in the analogy of the seat, with Jay Z building his table and scooting it into Master's house. Kaepernick building furniture that everybody can sit on. She went and bought some land in a building and started growing food. I like the analogy. Anyway, so now the next subscale, the toll. Self-destructive orientation for her is minimal. This is the dimension that can be misinterpreted, as I said earlier. Many would characterize her pattern of public conflict or interpersonal conflict as self-destructive, since it produced cumulative professional consequences that can be misconstrued as toll when we consider it through the plague, when we consider it through our oppressor's capitalistic lens. Cambon's framework would hold a more complex reading. The soul, self the toll, self destructive orientation measures pattern that undermines one's own well being and the well being of other Black people without full conscious awareness that you're doing it. It's done through internalized patterns that replicate the violence of this systemic oppression and the ongoing impact of the transatlantic slave trade at the interpersonal level. You become the oppressor, essentially, because that's what you know, that's what you've experienced, that's what it seems like success and accomplishment and safety is, to basically to model what has been done to you, to become the oppressor. And what it looks like is internalizing the stereotypes, engaging in self-sabotage, participating in systems that harm Black communities while benefiting yourself individually. Normalizing suffering is just how it is. Now, the most diagnostically precise framing is that the cost of being an outspoken pro Black woman inside a culturally misoriented industry, the whole industry, has produced destructive outcomes, not self destructive, because the toll is external not and structural, not internal and anti Black. And yet, the interpersonal patterns, the Marcus Books incident, the merchandise customer response, suggest that some conflict arrived through her own actions or behaviors. But in how I interpret and apply Dr. Cambon's work, I don't see these as explicitly anti Black, and thus the toll or the self destructive orientation is not a significant subscale for her. So her overall infection assessment for Amanda Seals is minimal. Aside from the subscales we just discussed, let me highlight some other points that clarify her minimal infection assessment. The radical rhythms experience that it sits at the intersection of embodied practice and critical consciousness. That's the kind of offering that Cambon's framework would recognize as, uh, I'm going to say blackety black. We could say Afrocentric because I don't want y'all to get caught up on this American foundational Black Americans versus Africans. Um, that are still on the continent or that are have immigrated to the United States. That is a diversion. That is a uh, something to get us off track of what actually is the focus. But anyway, that framework, this work that she's doing with Radical Rhythms Experience, this offering is something that Cambon's framework would recognize as uniquely Afrocentric, as institution building through cultural practice. Now, she had already established herself inside the system, inside the entertainment industry, in Hollywood, in all the ways, and then withdrew from it and began building an independent media infrastructure around her political, intellectual, and creative values. Amanda Seals has high remembering. The active, aware acknowledgement of oneself as African, as Black, as Indigenous, alongside and by Indigenous, I'm not talking about native to North America Indigenous, Indigenous to land as a whole. Shit, Indigenous to Grenada, where her mama from, alongside a commitment to the liberation, improvement, and respect of other people and the larger community, and low cultural misorientation infection. But the potential autism dimension and the CM or cultural misorientation relevant way to look at that through Cambon's framework is that she's perceived difficult, not as a primary function of neurodivergence potentially, but as a function of high remembering operating inside systems that require cultural misorientation, that require the infection in order to function smoothly, that requires you to forget who you are and let things slide and just navigate in order to survive. And she just doesn't seem to be willing to do that. Again, I'm not going to get into evaluating whether she has autism or not, or saying it's ableist, or any of the things that's being critiqued right now. I'm just saying it may be. either neurodivergence that causes the interpersonal communication to undermine what her actual goals are, and or could be both or one or the other. Who the fuck knows? The fact that she is so deeply committed to her remembering with a touch of the neurodivergence divergence that it comes off as difficult because she's like, fuck the system. I don't know. I'm just saying and giving you what the assessment tells us that a black woman with a master's of arts in African American studies who says, I left the real because it was breaking my spirit, may not be being difficult. She may just be refusing to perform the integration orientation that the system demands. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a neurologist. I'm not any form of licensed mental health professional. And I'm not making any diagnosis on Amanda Seals or anyone else that I've covered. But the autism self diagnosis adds a layer. Her directness, her inability to mask, her discomfort with respectability performance in lieu of intellectual honesty may amplify friction. But the root of the friction is political, not neurological. The industry punishes her because she won't perform, and displaying autistic traits means she can't even fake it if she wanted to. So I want to say something before we turn this to look at ourselves. The plague doesn't need your consent to infect you. It just needs the conditions that were put in place centuries ago and reinforced continuously. Compassion is not the same thing as excusing harm. Jay Z's Target, NFL, Barclay, philanthropy deals cost the Black community momentum and progress towards liberation, and we hold that fully. At least we should. Amanda Seals going after Marcus books or snapping at her own fans, that's real too, and we won't soften it just because she is down for her people. But we also hold this: three different children of the same original wound, three completely different responses. One got rewarded so lavishly, the plague convinced him that he was winning and still thinks he's winning. Two refused the reward and paid for that refusal in two different ways, in two different currencies, one in their career and one in community and reputation. Cambon's framework was never built to tell us who's the good one or who's the bad one, but it's built to ask who's remembering held or is amplified or is still there, at what cost, and who's still paying that cost right now, including all of us. That's the real question, and it's about to become the question about you. So here's the medicine. Breathe with me. Y'all know how I like to start all the things with breath because that, without breath, you can't live. It's the thing that you can control and yet the thing that you can't control. So just breathe. We spent this whole video pointing the lens outward at a billionaire, at a quarterback, at a artist scholar, naming where the plague runs the show, where the remembering broke through anyway, and where the remembering was always present. I found Colin's story most hopeful because he had no Black family, no Black community, no cultural formation in Black identity, and yet the remembering, that inborn orientation towards collective survival that Cambon says lives in every African descended person, found its way through anyway, which means it can find its way through all of us because it's already in you. It was there before our ancestors were enslaved and colonized. See how I'm including our continental African cousins? And the work of the Maafa could not fully erase it. That's how durable the remembering is. That's how powerful our ancestors were and are. Just consider whether you are creating conditions for the remembering to emerge or conditions that keep burying it. Dr. Cambon said the cure is reorientation, returning deliberately and consistently and repeatedly to African cultural education, learning the history, the philosophy, the traditions your ancestors carried. It's also community, building and sustaining relationships organized around collective survival, not individual accumulation or collecting an entourage that just tell you you're great as y'all get money. And returning to cultural spiritual practices, the ritual, the ceremonies, the naming, the music, the storytelling that connect you to what the plague, aka European dominance, tried to overwrite. And again, understand that the remembering isn't about skipping past Black culture that both emerged in and shaped America. It's not about furthering the severing of our connection to our continental African lineages either by denying their existence. The willingness to look at your own subscales. Where are you with the bag? Where are you with the seat? Where are you with your own mask? And what does it look like in a job where you've learned correctly from experience that the version of you that speaks up about race or injustice doesn't get promoted or maybe even get fired? Or in a relationship where you've learned that the version of you that tells the truth doesn't get chosen? Or in a community where you've learned that the blackest parts of you draw the most fire and the most criticism? Now, I'm not asking you to have the answers right now. I'm asking you to contemplate, to truly consider the questions, to sit with the questions, to let them circulate in your body and maybe free write some answers that come up. But that's what we're building here. That's what the remembering looks like as a practice, not just theory. We can look at Jay-Z and Kaepernick and Amanda Seals or any of the women from the other video that's already posted or the ones that are coming. But liberation starts when we look at ourselves. That free guide that I created, the Skinfolk Kinfolk Self-Reflection Guide, helps you do that. Grab that. The link is in the description and I'll pin it in the comments. Because, Charles, at this point, we've done the work of naming the infection, where the programming lives in us, in the folks who influence us, in the system surrounding us. The cultural misorientation infection works to colonize our minds, all of us to varying degrees. And the examination, the assessment, the exploration is essential. And it's one layer. Your Soul Knows the Assignment is my 6-week live cohort where we go into the soul level layer, naming the karmic patterns you came to break and embodying the wisdom your life has forged in you through the shit you've been through. So you can show up as your full, authentic self and contribute to humanity as only you uniquely can because we need you. You're here for a purpose. We need you to continue this path towards liberation, but it doesn't mean you need to sacrifice and be mammified in the process. There's gifts and talents that you uniquely have, and some of those gifts and talents had to be cultivated through the shit that you've been through. It all has a purpose. Now we're running another fall cohort this year, and early bird enrollment opens August 25th. Now my Love Letters newsletter family gets first access before the general public, before social media, before the sales page even goes live. My subscribers get the early bird link in their inbox. My Substack newsletter subscribers get the early bird link the morning of the 25th or sometime on the 25th. Let me not commit to the morning because sometimes I need my rest. But it'll have the pricing and the bonuses and all the things that are only available to early bird enrollment, to early access folks. So if you know your soul knows the assignment, your soul knows the assignment is the name of the course, is the deeper work you're being called to, or you just want to keep the door open in case you feel the vibe, because there's no commitment. I'm not about tapping into this capitalist system and getting people trapped. But grab the free Skinfolk Kinfolk Liberation Self-Reflection Guide. That's free. You can do this work and the liberation work, the skinfolk kinfolk work. And when you do, you'll also get my love letters from the ancestral mothers newsletter, and that's where the early bird enrollment gets announced first, before the general public, before all the other places. So there's one doorway. All you got to do is grab that self-reflection guide, that skinfolk kinfolk guide, and you'll get two gifts. You'll get the newsletter, obviously, and you'll get the guide, obviously, but then you'll also get access to this fall cohort that's coming up so we can all figure out why the fuck we here? What are we doing? Not like in this big existential general way, but very specifically based on who you are, what you've been through, and your gifts and talents. What are you here to contribute, and what are you here to experience, and what are you here to heal and release? That's what we get into that course. But anyway, get the Skinfolk Kinfolk Liberation self-reflection guide, and then you'll hear about when the early bird enrollment opens and learn more about what that is at that time. Because the reality is, the plague doesn't just run in individuals, it runs in communities. And when it's the most visible people, the most resourced Black people in our culture, like the Jay Z's or the Candace Owens, even though I know we don't claim Candace Owens, but she has an effect. When they use their cultural credibility to validate systems that the community is organized against, as we trying to get free, the work of collective liberation becomes harder for everyone. And that's what Cambone was sounding the alarm about. Not individual moral failure, but the collective cost of the plague infecting at scale, unexamined, unchecked, in people that the community is watching and influenced by. And like I said, the antidote is not cancellation. The antidote is consciousness, ours and theirs. And the refusal to let the bag, materialism, the seed, or any of these other solo dolo subscales be the final word on what a Black life is worth. So I want to thank you for rocking with me. This has been, man, I've been working on this one for a minute. It's been its own challenges, but we got through it. And I'm so thankful that you here and that you are willing to learn and hear and engage in the comments and for rocking with me on this. I know it's a long one and we went through the things. And I know this might have pissed off some Jay-Z stands and maybe even some Beyonce stands. We ain't even talking about Beyonce. At least she ain't been getting on stage talking shit. She did some dumb shit with that. But anyway, I get it. I still bump Jay Z. I can't not bump Jay Z. He's a lyrical genius. And I've been bumping it for decades, as I talked about. But that don't mean I'm going to excuse some fuck shit and be gaslit because dude got bars. I'm just saying. The decolonization of our minds and liberation is more important than that. So let's get free, y'all. Until then, though, drink your water, take good care of you. And I'll see you in the next video.